Hi, welcome to the Joy of Tennis Teaching. This is the third in our series on the 12 things I feel every tennis teaching pro should know. Let's review the first 8 very quickly. Number 1, you're a service professional first, a tennis professional second. Number 2, the importance of learning names. Number 3, enthusiasm is contagious. Your enthusiasm will determine the energy of all lessons. Number 4, personality only will lead to burnout. If enthusiasm is good for your student, improvement of your student is good for you. If you're just making the student feel happy, you're going to burn out eventually. The next 4 items on our list are the 3 learning styles. We talked about visual learners, audio intellectual learners, and kinesthetic learners. Show, tell, do. Next is know your stuff. Know all that there is to know from the standpoint of understanding the tennis concept you're teaching as a player, as a teacher, and as a coach of coaches. Number 7, watch lessons. Watch lessons in order to determine or in order to steal new ideas, not to determine what you would do in that lesson. And number 8 is care about your students, but understand that it's a 50-50 proposition, that you'll put in your 50%, your knowledge, your drills, your tips, your ideas, and the student has to come with their 50%, their willingness to listen, to try what you're teaching. So in order to get a 100% successful lesson, it's a 50-50 proposition. All right, that's a quick review of our last 2 videos. Next on the list, we've got check your work. And what I mean by this is at the end of every lesson, you want to do a summary. And the summary is not you telling the student what you taught them, it's you're asking the student, what did they learn? I've got a terrible story I want to tell on myself from my very first month as a PBI tennis professional back in 1979. I gave a lesson to this man, Kent, I still remember his name. And it was a lesson on his serve. And I thought the lesson went very, very well. Kent was serving beautifully by the end of the lesson. I didn't do a summary because I was going to see Kent later that afternoon as he was coming to play in the round robin. Well, Kent showed up for the little mixer round robin that I was running with 12 players, and we had 3 courts going and doubles on every court, and I was so enthusiastic to watch Kent serve. Kent proceeded to double fault every single point he served for the next 2 hours. It was a nightmare. I couldn't believe it. And so when the round robin finished, I pulled Kent aside and I said, "What happened to your serve? You were serving so great this morning." And he said, "I did exactly what you said. I tightened up and held the racket with my wrist as locked as possible on every serve." Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know if I misspoke or if Kent misheard me, but I do know that that is not what I was trying to teach him. As a matter of fact, that's the exact opposite of what I was trying to teach him. And if I had done a summary, I would have discovered the misunderstanding and prevented us both a very embarrassing round robin. I gave Kent a free lesson the next day and we straightened it out, and his serve was fine the rest of his vacation. Number 10, habits are powerful. There's all kinds of theories about habits and how much of our life is controlled by habit. I'm not sure exactly how much, but I do know habits are very, very powerful. We've all had the situation where we've been driving someplace and we ended up some other place just out of habit. So it's really important to develop good habits. And the first type of habits I want you to focus on are habits of professionalism. Be on time for your lesson. I know Peter Burwash told me when he started PBI, he asked a lot of student vacationers, travelers to Hawaii, what was the things they liked and didn't like about lessons. And the number one thing people hated was waiting for the tennis professional to show up for their lesson. So we had very strict rules, and we developed the habits very early for all of our professionals to be on time. Also, finish your lesson on time. I worked with a young pro once who was very giving with his time, and he would go overtime with his lesson, which meant the next lesson in line was waiting, and it created a backlog and it created a lot of problems. Learn to dress professionally, look good. In the resort industry, which I know very well, the view of tennis professionals is really that we're not that professional, as opposed to PGA golf professionals are all viewed as being very professional. Well, it's because they have standards for their dress and for the way that they're groomed and the way that they behave at work. We want to incorporate those same standards into our tennis professional life. Be on time, finish on time, be professional, look professional, dress professional. Make sure your teaching balls are in good condition. This was a pet peeve of mine for years. I would show up at a club for a tennis coaches conference or just for a visit, and I would see the worst ratty balls, and I'd say, are these a rental basket or are these dog balls? What are these? And they'd say, oh no, that's Bob's teaching basket. Absolutely inexcusable. So make sure that your equipment is in good shape. Really think about it. Are you presenting a 100% professional image? Number 11, habits are powerful. I'm not repeating myself. I just want to talk about a different type of habit. What are you teaching? We used to do a thing we called lesson cards, where we would have to record what we covered in a lesson. And it was great in the resort business, especially where you'd have guests returning a year later and you could look back at the card and say, hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing? We worked on that backhand last year. Did it hold up? Students would be incredibly impressed by this memory that we had. But I liked something else about doing lesson cards. Lesson cards would show if you were getting in the habit of using the same drills, the same exercises for every student. We've all done this. You do a drill with Mary on Monday and it works great for her backhand. And so then you start doing that same drill with every student throughout the week. And I'm not saying you can't do the same drills with different students, but are you doing it because it helps those students, or are you doing it out of habit? Are you just in a rut? Are you just repeating the same phrases, the same gimmicks, the same drills over and over again? Remember, habits are powerful, and you won't know what habits you're falling into unless you keep track of yourself. And finally, number 12 is something that in PBI we call the LOT theory, L-O-T. And that stands for listen, observe, teach. And I saved this for number 12 because I think it's maybe the most powerful teaching concept that any tennis professional can learn. Listen, observe, teach explains how you should approach every lesson with every student. What you want to do is you want to listen to your student. Ask them questions. When a student shows up for your lesson, we all ask, what do you want to work on? Well, sometimes the students will say everything or I don't know. Then you have to ask more questions. Do you play more singles than doubles? What part of your game do you like the best? What part of your game makes you nervous? There are great questions that you can ask. If the student comes to you and says, oh, I want to work on my backhand, a follow-up question is, well, what do you think is wrong with your backhand? But here's a trick, questioners. Listen to their answer, but don't believe them. If they knew what was wrong with the problem, they could fix them themselves. So if a student comes to you and says, yeah, the problem is I don't watch the ball on my backhand, say, okay, great, that's interesting, but don't believe them. Check their understanding. We want to ask them the questions because we want to understand what they think about their lessons or their game and what they believe about their game. This is very important because you're going to have to change that belief if you're going to make significant changes in their game. But then we get to the O in our lot theory. Observe. How do we observe? Well, you warm up the student. You hit with them, you feed balls to them, you toss balls to them. If it's a group lesson, you have them rally with each other. But you must observe the student before you begin teaching. I've seen many new pros ask the student, what do you want to work on? They say, oh, I want to work on the serve. What's wrong with the serve? Oh, it's my toss. And right away they start teaching the toss rather than, seeing what's really wrong with the student's serve. And then later on, when they get into it, the toss is fine. The problem is that they're holding the racket too tight or they're stiff with their arm. So make sure that you observe your lessons. A lot of times for new pros, you feel the pressure of, oh, geez, they're paying me for this hour. I want them to hit balls for the whole hour with me teaching. I can remember one lesson that I did after I was a pretty experienced coach where I just couldn't figure out what was wrong with the student's stroke. And I just kept feeding balls to him and hitting balls to him and trying them on the run in different scenarios. I observed for almost 25 minutes of a 60-minute lesson before it clicked and I got it and we started teaching. The student didn't complain about that long warm-up because they were having fun and getting exercise, and they ended up improving greatly. And I think they improved mostly because my camera stopped. What the heck's going on here? Or maybe not. Oh well. That they improved because I took the time to observe what was going on before I went. So listen, observe, and then teach, and you'll find you'll have a lot more successful lessons. Apologize for that little blip in there, and I don't know how to edit it out, so you're going to get the benefit of my inability to see the camera very well. Finally, before we close today, I want to once again thank everybody for the comments that you've been making about these videos. But something has not happened yet, is I haven't had lots of questions. So let's treat these YouTube videos in the 50-50 theory, and I'm putting out the video and doing my best to make the information useful for you. But let me know, which of these 12 things was your favorite? Which do you have questions about? Please send me your questions, and that's going to direct us in future videos. Thanks again for your time, and remember, it's up to you now to put in your 50% and send me your questions. Good luck and enjoy the joy of tennis teaching.